So Bitcoin's trading in a very narrow range. A lot of the economic data that's coming out is certainly mixed, especially the data from the last 2 weeks that showed CPI and PPI, which are measures of inflation, greatly less than anticipated. They were negative numbers versus positive numbers. In other words, prices are retracting, not increasing. So things look good on inflation, yet the Fed will not drop the rates because they're worried about future tariff implications on inflation, even though it hasn't quite happened yet. So all in all, Bitcoin's been trading in a very, very narrow range. And when is it going to break out? When is that range going to end? I'm going to show you the 5 reasons I'm still very bullish on Bitcoin, what I see happening in the near future, and when we might break out of this range and start the real bull run. With that, remember, every single day in crypto is an adventure, so be sure to join me along the journey. Hit the subscribe button, like, share, do all those things. And with that, let's get into it talking about Mr. Bitcoin. But first, we're going to get into the economic data from this week. Between the major economic data that we had this week was the initial jobless claims that came in yesterday, came in a little bit better than expected, not much. Came in at 215 versus 225. Housing starts below expectations. Building permits slightly above expectations. Philly Fed manufacturing survey way less than expectations. So, all in all, this week's data was fairly flat. The import price index, which is another cost of goods coming in for the import, less than expected. So all in all, fairly flat for the week. Next week we have some data, some important data, but right now what's what's really supercharging the narrative is still the tariffs. It's all about the tariffs. If you look at the price of Bitcoin, it's been fairly flat the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days. It's really trying to push up against this $96,000 or $86,000 mark. It really wants to get above that mark, and it's just struggling. It's a really, really strong ceiling of resistance. Now, with all that in mind, you can look at where people are betting. People are pretty even money on it's a tight spread. Liquidations are a tight spread in long and shorts on the 1 day. 7 day market, there's a lot of liquidations. Just if we went up to 87,000, there's a lot of liquidation sitting at that level. There's a lot of short or long leverage sitting right around 82, 83. So the market thinks it's just going to trade in that narrow range until there's a breakout. So what is going to cause that breakout? We've talked about it many, many times before. It comes down to the tariffs. But why am I still bullish on Bitcoin? Let's talk about that. Number 1, institutional adoption. Institutional adoption. Most of the major players, BlackRock, Fidelity, they are involved in crypto. They're offering Bitcoin spot ETFs. Ethereum, they've put in requests for Solana, XRP, some of the major players out there for ETFs. Still a major factor. I mean, they're giving crypto to the masses in a way that's very easy to consume, through their stock portfolio, their wealth management portfolios, and things like that. So that mainstream acceptance signals major adoption across the board, across the planet. Makes it very easy to get. Second thing I'm really looking at is the safe haven narrative. Think about this. Crypto is becoming that safe haven narrative because just look. If you just look at the price, it's been fairly flat when we've had lots and lots of volatility in the stock market, in the bond market. Bitcoin has stayed fairly flat throughout this. It's not quite gone up like gold has in the last couple of weeks, but it has stayed very flat and hasn't lost a lot of value since this whole tariff narrative started out. So that I see as a very, very bullish thing. Number 3, regulatory clarity. The EU, most of Asia, the United States of America, they're all working on clarity for crypto adoption. Not choke point 2.0 and trying to get rid of crypto like the Biden administration, but trying to give it life through adoption on actual actual laws and rules that will surround it, and then won't choke it out, but it'll actually give it some framework to have stable coins, that may or may not compete with the US dollar, to have to have Bitcoin, and all these things. So the laws that are being worked on and the bills that are being given to Congress are very, very strong. Number 4, global monetary shifts. Now think about this. If the world is signaling prolonged printing of money and you want a safe haven for your assets, Bitcoin could present that opportunity with only 21 million ever that will be in existence, a fixed supply, no controller, no company or government that says, oh, okay, we're going to lower or increase supply, with the immaculate conception, as Michael Saylor talks about it. It is still a decent place. Even look at this right here. It's still a decent place to keep your money and have it stay somewhat stable or increasing over time. It has that history. Past performance is indicative of future results. There's risk and all these things. Not your financial advisor. This is certainly not financial advice. But right now, Bitcoin looks like a safe haven for your money. Now, is that going to stay forever? I can't tell you that. But right now, it looks like a decent hedge. 5th and final thing that I'm looking at is corporate treasury adoption. Corporate treasury adoption. Imagine this. Companies have a lot of money. They have billions of dollars, trillions of dollars sitting in their assets. They have cash. They're sitting on billions of dollars of cash. Apple, billions. Google, billions. Even Garmin, $2.5 billion sitting in cash. At some point, they have to make a decision. What are we going to do with this money? Are we going to buy back our stock? Are we going to reinvest it back? We're going to buy some assets that will hedge the rest of our actions and adoptions in our portfolio. So we're seeing that. Obviously, MicroStrategy or strategy is the main one that we're seeing, but there are others right now that are doing the same thing or thinking about doing the same thing to buy Bitcoin and hold it like a strategic reserve like the United States. I didn't even mention, this is the 6th and bonus one, strategic reserve for the United States. If the United States is going to buy 1 million Bitcoin, and they're going to increase their holdings 5-fold. I mean, the buy pressure, can you imagine the pressure that would put on Bitcoin's price? I mean, that would be astronomical. Now, imagine if other countries are going to compete for the same Bitcoin and to create a strategic reserve. You don't think that if the United States adopts a strategic reserve of Bitcoin, that other nations around the world are going to try to follow suit and do that? They're already trying to front run the U.S. and have a strategic Bitcoin reserve. So all in all, I am still extraordinarily bullish on Bitcoin. Is it going to go to $1 million this year? Probably not. But could it go to 150 to 200 this year? That's absolutely possible and in the cards. Probable? I don't know. Possible? Abso-freaking-lutely. Probable? Oh, man. I would like to say my target is still 120 to 150 this year, regardless of what happens. This prolonged tariff issue, which we're not even in prolonged yet. When will Bitcoin pop out of this range? 2 things have to happen. Once the tariffs end, and they will end, Trump has signaled that they think they'll wrap it up in 2 to 3 weeks. Maybe he's super optimistic as usual, but he probably knows more than I do on that issue. And I'm sure China wants to get done with it. You can't deny 1/3 of the purchasing power in the entire world is in the United States. To deny that market would be difficult. Not impossible, but difficult for foreign nations. And they want U.S. as a trading partner. We pay very well. We stick to our terms. We give favorable terms. Our people are insatiable to buy things, and it just makes sense. If China doesn't do it, someone else will. China knows this, but they also know they do have some power in some of the other things that they offer. So all in all, that's one of the things that has to happen, is that tariff narrative has to be done. Once that tariff narrative is done, you're going to see this change pretty drastically. And this is the CME Fed Rate Watch in May. They don't predict. People aren't predicting a Fed rate drop in May. And this is what he signaled in his speech the other day on Monday or Tuesday, the 15th, April 15th, that he signaled that, look, tariffs are still the unknown, and we're worried that tariffs are going to cause inflation. Inflation is what their enemy is. To bring it down to that 2% level, they're going to have to watch this closely. I don't like that narrative because it's speculative by nature, that they're speculating that the tariffs are going to cause inflation. And that being said, Fed looks in the rearview mirror, they're a month or 2 behind on their data because they look at last month's or last quarter's data to make their decisions. In the meantime, the price of everything has dropped, as we proved through the CPI and the PPI, the Consumer Price Index, Producer Price Index, and the Importer Price Index. Those are the 3 indexes that are inflationary driven. And all of those are down. Now, they are down, but they could go up is what they're saying, but they're not. So if this is weird that the Fed's looking in the rearview mirror for all their data except speculating based on tariffs. But in any event, they don't want that inflation to get out of hand because that's their goal, is to curb inflation. And so right now, they're not predicting a lot. But if this data could change drastically quickly when the tariff narrative ends, and when that happens, and it might signal a money pump, that's when you'll see crypto, I believe, blast off and break out of that channel. And that is the one that, now there's could be other X factors that I'm just not privy to right now that could happen, but right now that's what we're looking at. So we're in a bit of a holding pattern. And so we're going to wait to see what happens. And with that, that's all I got for today. I hope you got some value out of this. If you did, hit the like button. Otherwise, I will see you next time.